I just felt like I had to kind of erase my past to fit into the future, and I
Yeah.
didn't find that comfortable. So I set up something that involved political risk. You sitting in a corner and you're eating by yourself if you're a woman. How humiliating is that?
Hi, and welcome to the latest episode of But Is It Legal? I'm your host, Simon Marshall, the founder of TBD Marketing. And as you know, we explore a variety of different conversations about what's happening at the cutting edge of legal practice in the UK legal sector. And today we've got Dana Denis-Smith with us, who I'll let introduce herself and she can tell you all about the kinds of good things that she does. And we've got about half an hour or so with her. I'm really looking forward to this. So, Dana, tell us a bit about who you are and what you do.
Oh, thank you for having me. Well, I won't reveal too much about who I am and what I do because otherwise I'll have nothing to cover the next half an hour with. So I am the CEO of Obelisk Support, which is one of the new breed legal businesses that have emerged in the sector since the opening of the legal market in 2010. And I also set up a charity that ran a campaign to celebrate 100 years of women in law called First 100 Years. And now we are into the next 100 years. The charity's name is Spark 21, and I am one of the trustees.
Could you talk to me a bit about the pivotal moments that happened on the way up to forming Obelisk, and then the ones that have happened since, and really those kind of moments that changed what you were going to do and why you did it?
So I qualified as a solicitor in one of the Magic Circle law firms, and I guess that's when I kind of entered the legal profession. I came a bit later than other people. I came via a first career in journalism. So when I arrived in practice, everything that I learned about the freedom to roam and write your story and file on time, and kind of nobody asked me where I was or how many hours I took to write my story. I was just quite shocked about the culture in, in the law firm, right? So I trained, and I think I picked up a lot of the kind of cultural vibes that didn't suit me, and also the kind of position of women in these organizations. But I didn't really understand how the puzzle fitted together, to be honest. It was just kind of an accumulation of knowledge. And then I left to become an entrepreneur on qualifying pretty much after. And because I just wanted to create something from scratch. I wasn't sure whether it would be legal or something else. So I set up something that involved political risk. So very different organization operating across emerging markets. It was in the times of Lehman Brothers, so it was very timely because the kind of concept of BRICS was emerging, and I was at the heart of it. So I didn't really, I came to law because I married a future barrister, and we talked about law stuff, and then I thought, well, that sounds interesting, and you've got interesting friends, and it seems to be like a really interesting um, place to be. And I kept reading all the legal news and all his bar communications and everything that was arriving. I was reading, he wasn't reading. And I thought, well, I'm obviously interested in this world. So it wasn't something I kind of grew up dreaming to be, or I had an example in the family I want to be. It was just a kind of, I met a bunch of people that inspired me to think that it could be a place for me to be. But when I arrived, I felt it was very different. And I didn't feel like what I had done before mattered. I didn't
Right.
feel like it was a kind of natural, like when you change in life and you grow and you grow older, you feel like things are kind of, bricks that kind of keep on building. I just felt like I had to kind of erase my past to fit into the future. And I
Yeah.
didn't find that comfortable. So when I set up my first business, it came out of that sense of, well, I'm more than just one thing, being this lister in one firm. I have more ideas and I want to bring all of that to play. I don't want to be cornered into one narrow specialism, which was employment, by the way. And I did love it, especially court work. I love going to the tribunal. But I just didn't want to be so narrow. And I guess the experience I had and all the kind of cultural vibes that I picked up, I didn't know how they would fit into business until basically 2010 when I went to India on a ministry kind of economic mission with my business. And I discovered this world of outsourcing, LPOs, lots of people doing low level work, and just kind of you seem to be, if you can just throw lots of cheap people to the problem, then that seemed to be a solution that was acceptable. And when I came back, it was just one of those moments where you have this kind of big bang moment where you're just saying, okay, so now it makes sense because people want cheaper solutions. I get it, more affordability, there's more work, they're larger teams, they need support. But why do you need to go so far to find people that can do the work? So that was kind of the lingering thought. So when I came back, I thought, well, we've trained so many women that I no longer see in the law firms. So if we create more affordability around a more local solution, surely it's good for everybody, good for the planet, good for the people, good for everybody. Um, except that the clients didn't agree. So I set up the business with this enthusiasm that we're solving a lot of kind of societal issues with Obelisk as an idea, especially for larger corporate teams. But they had, because all of my mums were at home, they had lots of concerns about confidentiality and setup and operational infrastructure. And, I was just starting up.
How long did it take people to come around to your way of thinking? Was it months, years?
Well, it took quite a while. Also, it wasn't helped by the fact that I became less available because in that great Big Bang moment, I also had the wonderful discovery, which was delightful, that I was pregnant, and
Right.
therefore everything had to go at a slightly different pace to make sense for all the aspects of my life. So it took about 2 years simply because I was also, having to look after a newborn, and it, I didn't have investors, I didn't really have a team. So it was a tough start, also because I had a lot of the reception was very lukewarm. I didn't have networks. I didn't know people. And so starting from absolutely zero, I had £500, which I put into a website, which said something about extending your legal team with fantastic city trained moms, which probably wasn't the right value proposition, um, as it was then, the market. So it took a while to kind of persuade people for them to get to know me because I wasn't a name. So it wasn't as if partner from Linklaters moved to set up their firm. I was NQ from Linklaters with a crazy idea. So it took a while to prove that the idea wasn't crazy.
Was it one or two organizations that took a leap of faith?
So the breakthrough was from Goldman Sachs.
Yeah, as you do,
As
right?
you do, I was introduced by somebody who was actually coaching somebody within Goldman Sachs, but she was a mum and she immediately got it because she herself felt the pressure, but also she understood, she could see the attrition happening. It wasn't my discovery. I just acted on it in a way that I felt it wasn't about telling moms you're not ready or you're not good enough. My idea was, can I find you work that you can do straight away? Because I think you still have it in you. So that was a slightly different, more proactive approach than the usual kind of I put you on a course and then maybe you'll be okay to be servicing clients. So I was very kind of, let's just give them the opportunity. And she absolutely got it because they do know what they're saying and what they're doing. It doesn't take so long to get up to speed. And you kind of need to start with that positive step as opposed to kind of prove yourself step. Anyway, so Goldman's basically were a miracle. I think it was about 2012. I almost didn't get it because I had one lady who I was paying to come and stay with the baby whilst I was running to meetings because I couldn't pay full time childcare or all of that because I was, an entrepreneur, and she got the timing wrong, which it was a complete disaster. And she was somewhere really far away. There was no way she could make it, and so I had two options: either take the baby with me, which might have been a bit. Still, Goldman's were open, but maybe not that open, and for my husband to just turn up and stay with the baby because it was a very important meeting, and he did. He came, we didn't even exchange words, we just basically just crossed paths, and I ran and he ran in, and it worked out. So that was a really great breakthrough. um and I remember, but once we signed the contract, I arrived from the meeting, and the kind of whole Goldman's power with like thousands of emails appearing inboxes and everything and the instructions. I just felt that whole opportunity being really big. And it was very exciting because we knew what we were doing. So that was basically, once we had Goldman's as a client, we were credible. We could show these fantastic women could still absolutely do the work, and then others followed. So it was very much a corporate market that we were targeting, corporate legal teams with a lot of work and need for more flexible and affordable solutions, which I thought we had dreamt up beautifully, despite people working from home. That very, very, very controversial thing.
An employment lawyer who dreams of people being able to work flexibly. Who knew? What were the odds? Where are we today? Just so that other people can finish off the story for us. Like, what's the scale of the business like today?
Well, the scale right now is over 2,000 people that we pre-vetted and are sitting on the platform and get deployed according to availability and specialisms. 200 something clients that we're working with, multi-million business turnover, a whole central team that are excited and aligned and ready for bigger times ahead. So very different story from the early days between me, the baby, the bouncer chair, and the never sleeping timetable.
Rely on a husband who's making it home for a meeting to make sure that you can go and make yours as well. So,
Well, and we were lucky, to be honest, and that's where you realize, because he's a barrister, he could nip out because he wasn't in court every
self-employed.
day. That exactly, that self-employed flexibility helped me, because otherwise I couldn't have done it, or I would have probably taken the baby, but probably there would have been quite a shock.
I love that. What a brilliant story as well. It's lovely to talk about you for a change as well. We are going to come to some of the other stuff, and I know that you're, always available for kind of talking about things at an industry level as well. But it is good to talk about the successes that you've had as well. Do you still have that entrepreneur's kind of appetite, as it were, the one that you had back in, 2010, 2012? Is it? Do you feel as entrepreneurial now as you did then?
Absolutely. And but also I like the growth that I've been through, because for me, the reason why I set up the business in this format is because it had scalability. From my first business, I realized that very much you can become caught up by being the expert in your business,
Yeah.
and or you are the blocker in the business. For me, really, the excitement around Obelisk was, how can I actually do the one job that is that kind of visionary job, and I set people up to succeed and I coach the direction of travel, but I'm not really in the detail. And it has the possibility to grow and be global. And, that was the exciting part. So I think that, we one geography, we have new service lines. There's so many opportunities that you can come up with as an entrepreneur and drive, because that kind of diversifying is part of the scale, isn't it? And getting bigger, you can't just keep doing the same thing and hope to get a bigger or different result. So for me, that scaling was what attracted me to the idea itself, setting it up in this format.
Have you bootstrapped it all the way through then? Is that what you did? Because you did it that way at first, and you kind of set up with this £500 and invested it in marketing, which I think is a good idea, obviously. And then some shoe leather and some meetings and some networking. These all sound like really good kind of steps to have taken, but you've not taken outside investment in the business beyond, your own work at the moment.
I tried to get investment very early on because I thought, again, it's very lonely at the start, pregnant and everything. So it was just tough. And I went to I created kind of a business plan to the best of my ability. And I went to angel meetings and had some follow-up meetings. And people thought it was a genius idea. You have a whole untapped talent pool, or people that needed flexibility, want to work in a different way. And for whatever reason, the market is not ready to create the opportunities. So I was matching and kind of mediating that space where the lawyers wanted something and the client wanted something else. But actually, I was saying, well, no, because the outcome will be what you each want. But I'm there to kind of moderate. And so people were very excited. They thought it was a great idea, but not if they had to invest in a pregnant woman. So things were being said, I guess, quite directly at the time, 14 years ago, when the world was a different world for female entrepreneurs, for the world of investment.
Yeah.
But that was basically it. I tried because I thought I could build up, especially because I was pregnant. I realized I could have more people ready and be able to have that continuity and not have to kind of take a step back because I'm in hospital, but it wasn't to be. And at the end of the day, I mean, I had the most absurd investment conversations. I mean, at one point, I had a term sheet that I had basically nothing on it, but the guy wanted 50% of my business because he could see her potential, but it wasn't pretend, really prepared to invest properly, because I think that value of women's businesses has really evolved since then. But so yeah, I tried, but I didn't get anywhere. And yeah, it was a pivotal moment because it made me realize sales first. And to sell and succeed means that you are servicing, which means that you're doing something right. And that means you're testing what you're trying to sell and you have the opportunity to adapt to the market. And actually, it was much better. I mean, it didn't make for any more comfortable meetings because still the market was evolving in terms of their appetite to buy. At least I was learning firsthand what they didn't like, what they found problematic, or where I needed, for example, ramping up recruitment really fast and getting a lot of lawyers on our books was really important because all of them were flexible. So, to get one person, you need to get three people to be a full-time equivalent. And so people could say, well, but it's easier for me to work with one person. But I was saying, but these other three people can be the equivalent and you are locking them out. And once you lock them out, they can't generate the knowledge to keep current. So they will be forever lost. So you have that kind of agility. So I think that way of thinking, anyway, it's just part of, if you'd asked me, I didn't know because I grew up under communism, so we didn't have any private economy when I was growing up. So there was no idea of an entrepreneur. But I think to the extent that you can say, well, are they born as them? Of course, you can make people into anything you want, but I think there is a kind of appetite for risk. There's a kind of sense of seeing a little bit further into an idea that other people can't see, that I think I do have, that it's a natural ability and I can't help it to come up with new ideas. And the challenge for me, especially in growth, is not to be scattergun because that's what entrepreneurs do. Then they get
Yeah.
in the way of their businesses achievements because actually other people that are better than me do a better job of what I'm not as good at. But I can maybe see sometimes things beyond the horizon they can see, and that's where I add value. But so it's exciting for me to also kind of rein myself in and be more disciplined and also learn from people who I brought in because they're better than me, and that's exciting.
Yeah, I found the hardest thing was we created a couple of things at times that have been far enough ahead of the market. The market didn't want them, and I had to make a decision as an entrepreneur. Was I right? Is this where the market was going? Right? Or were other people right and we'd wasted money on a bad idea and it was just time to call something cost fallacy. And I think the hardest thing as the entrepreneur is probably when you're halfway along that journey before the first sale and kind of you're prevaricating between should I carry on or not as well. So yeah, I'm really interested to hear you talk about that bit of it just then. Um, Tell me a bit about what prompted you then. I mean, the business was a success, things lifted off. And then you spotted on the horizon that the first 100 years of a woman becoming a sister in the UK, sorry, under England and Wales, was on the horizon. What prompted you to do something about that? What was it that came up and you thought, I really need to celebrate this milestone?
Well, to be honest, I thought if not me, nobody will. To be honest, it was that kind of. I thought I've seen it, and I'm not seeing any sounds or any kind of anything being done by anybody. So you can also allow it to be a muted celebration, or you can actually make something of it. Because I thought it's a real. I could see from the market that there was this kind of tension around women coming in high numbers and not staying, and so there was a kind of a sense that women felt they didn't belong. They just felt they passers by, and so for me, I didn't know where that was coming from. So there was constant kind of monitoring of, oh, this year we have 1% more women partners. Oh, we had, whatever. So it was all very kind of tactical, but there was no context to it. I mean, why 1%? I mean, why is the 50-50 the right number? I mean, there was no kind of sense of what is the conversation really about. And I guess again, this kind of knowledge I picked up that was in the back of my brain, not seeing a lot of female partners in practice or whatever. I didn't make anything of it at the time, but it doesn't mean I didn't see it. I just didn't know how to use it. So at one point, I mean, it was again my husband. He spent one year at Herbert Smith, and he was getting the alumni magazine, and the alumni magazine, which was in hard copy, had an interview with a guy who had been a partner and turned 100, and it was 100 years of his life, which was fascinating. But in the corner, he illustrated it with this picture of the partnership having a party to celebrate 150 years of the firm, maybe. And there was just one woman in the middle. And it had nothing to do with this woman, but suddenly I looked at the date, it said 1982. And I, wow, I realized it was my lifetime. And they had just the one woman, 60 men, one woman. And I thought, wow, well, maybe there's something in this history. This year, it just disturbed me. I didn't know who she was. I didn't have any knowledge about the 100 years. Nobody taught us at school about,
No.
a woman couldn't be lawyers or any of that. So I just researched, and I discovered this 1919 Act being so pivotal in how it opened up the profession to women. Obviously, actually, it was the whole of the UK plus Ireland, because Ireland was still part of the UK at the time. So it was an opening also in the Commonwealth, because obviously a lot of the legislation applied. So it was actually a massive global step. And so, because of my, I guess, good, sense of numbers, I realized it was coming up in 5 years. And that I had enough time, because again, I was quite busy with the toddler now and the business picking up now suddenly, good clients and everything. So the last I wanted was a big thing that would make my life even more complicated. So I thought, well, if I have 5 years, my sole objective was, can we find the woman that we don't know anything about and tell their story, and we created this timeline of history, and then can we rush to record all the women who were first before we lose them, because otherwise we'll have no record of their achievements. So I had very kind of narrow ambitions to get to film and create this kind of museum dedicated to women, but I didn't plan to have, an artwork in the Supreme Court or an exhibition touring around the country or two books or whatever. That all came through because the appetite was huge, and the lack of knowledge and that kind of need for information and education was big. So we responded to it, talking about entrepreneurs, going with the wave rather than necessarily creating the wave. But um, the idea was simply, if we don't catalog our own history as women, then history will be told by other people in whichever way they want, and we might not feature yet again.
I know it's really hard to put you on the spot given the amount of stories that are contained in that campaign, but what's your favorite story out of all the ones that you uncovered in the first 100 years?
Of the current firsts that are still alive, or the women who
Whichever.
really, because they're quite different. I mean, I think me, of the kind of ones I didn't get to meet, which I would have loved to have met. To be honest, they're all real characters, which is kind of fun. So if you look at Helena Normanton, she was a real campaigner, really, pestering a lot of people. It's probably why when she applied to the inn the first time, they just didn't want this troublemaker, because they definitely would have had her down as, just being trouble. And then you have the other end, you have, Rose Heilbrunn, who's this kind of, slightly different generation, but elegant and beautiful, and seemed to be able to kind of make her way without friction. So you see, to me, that kind of difference of generations learning from the other ones how to operate within a system that didn't really welcome them. I mean, for me, they always, the stories, not necessarily about the individuals, but the settings. When you think about, they've allowed the woman in, finally they qualified, but you're not allowed at the mess. So you're sitting in a corner and you're eating by yourself. If you're a woman, how humiliating is that? Which is exactly the same story that I always fascinated me with the photograph with the one woman in the middle, is how
Yeah.
did it feel to be the only one by yourself in the era of smoking rooms, billiard rooms, separated gender rooms. So you basically, how can you grow? How can you create relationships with these men if you're always placed in a room of your own? And so to me, the settings, even the call to bar of the first woman, she was the first, she was the only one with 20 plus other men. And, how do you, how do you behave? And then you realize even later generations that you had the first woman partner. they were very affected by this kind of lack of freedom to operate in the way you are, because they had to fit into a very different environment. And we took over 100 years to shake it off. And that kind of role model of being a woman that fits into that world really, really affected generations even today, that basically said you had to be like a man to make it. But if you look at the history, it really teaches you why it evolved that way and why we can actually now learn from it, but also leave it behind, which I think is the next, frontier, is to really adapt to the new, not always to repeat the past stories.
You mentioned female founders there earlier on. I think it was beyond legal sector, really. You were talking about, I mean, more broadly, kind of female founders. But any thoughts on female founders within the legal sector? Any challenges that are specific to them as a group of individuals?
Well, it's to be honest, I looked into female founders in law, and I tracked the fundraising success. I think it was the first study, and I keep a spreadsheet to see, how successful women are. And obviously, we know women raise less. They have smaller tickets. They chat, they really have a really tough time fundraising. And in the age of AI and technology, you don't have runway if you don't raise. And I know even from my own model, which is a sales first model, it's really difficult because growth requires capital. It's that simple. It's not my recipe, it's the kind of accepted recipe. And women don't have access to that, which means that they have to go slower. They have to make choices that don't, accelerate into unicorn. And I think female founders in law track below the average. So the average for female founders is about 2% of all VC money. In law, when I looked at it, and I think it's not really changed much, it was below the 1%. So women just don't get the money to build big businesses. And we have, I think, about 10 women around the world that raised more than 2 million. And when you think of, for example, Clio, they've raised 900 million in one raise. Women don't even make it to Series A. They can't get seed, they can't get Series A, and maybe there's a couple that got to something like a Series C, which means that it's really difficult. You can't really scale. And so the temptation to kind of consolidate into a competitor or be bought early is there. That results in the woman cashing in a smaller amount, which means they traps you in that kind of lower um, scale. And if you haven't raised, like in my case, then if you wanted to say start something new, the credentials of running a successful business are there, but the credentials of knowing how to run with investors is a slightly different skill set, and you don't have it. So you will always have this kind of disadvantage of what you haven't done because you haven't experienced it. And it's funny how it's always playing out as a kind of, well, you would be perfect, but you're lacking. And that is a message that I think a lot of female founders, there's something, I mean, actually I had a story just the other day with this lady, really shocked me, but she basically is trying to fundraise for a technology product. And she basically was told that she might run off with some kind of, exotic Argentinian man and not really want to run her business because all her kids had fled the nest, and therefore what would hold her in one place, and why wouldn't she just want to have fun? Random, completely speculative, insulting, and everything. But it does mean that the discussion is moving away from what she needs to fund a successful idea, or maybe not a successful idea, because lots of them fail, and it diverts into a kind of personal space that investors have no reason to be in. So I think they are serious challenges that remain, and we just haven't got the traction. There's no momentum around women fundraising. Have you? What's the latest time that you heard of a female-led business that has raised a serious amount? Nothing this year.
Not that I've seen, not that I know of as
Yeah.
well. It's an interesting point as well. Um, for those who maybe instead have to rely on bootstrapping it, maybe who haven't got that external investment at this point in time, if I gave you a 5 minute kind of keynote to speak to them, give me a couple of bullets that you'd say to them, given your track record now, 14, 15 years of having set up the business, what would you impart as your gems
Well,
knowledge?
maybe the focus on clients, to be honest, because I used to call the clients, and I remember I used to produce investor reports, impact investor impact reports that were for clients. I call them investors because I took the view anybody that bought from me created that possibility for me to have longevity in the market, because without them I wouldn't be here. So we used to kind of scorecard them and say, look, well done for taking returners, this is some of the feedback. And it was a one pager, a dashboard, but in the days of Excel, where I was just basically uses this language of investment in the company. I really saw them as early adopters of an idea. And so you have to listen to them. If they show concerns, don't take it personal, because it's actually a really good way to refine your offer. And then go, you know, in a very disciplined way to market and adapt and be adaptable and make sure you win. Because the more clients you win, the more you don't need investors to come in and buy into your equity.
Love that. Couple of last questions. I'm really mindful of time because you've been so generous with it so far as well. You've been at the forefront of kind of developing and changing the mindset about how we access talent within the legal sector in the UK and beyond over the last few years. Any thoughts for the next 5 to 10 years? Anything that you're seeing that's going to massively change how we go about resourcing legal advice?
Yeah, well, I think, to be honest, the arrival of AI is very exciting to me, because I think it will take this idea of desegregated legal work to another level. So I think it's a very exciting time to kind of look at skills in a very different way, and also what talent and what kind of skills we need. And so I think finally, I'm hoping in the next 10 years, we will see that kind of genuine transformation of the practicing of law, where actually qualified professionals coming with their expertise, with the real added value knowledge, and the tools do a lot of the grunt work. And I think we're seeing that because, especially with um, younger companies, they don't want to have legal as a kind of fixed cost, because it's not really a constant need. You might have contracts, but if you automate them, most of them are low value, or repeatable, or they can follow a set of rules which you can basically teach the engine to follow. You can have the lawyers come in and kind of spot check, or bring quality to higher value things. But I think that's really exciting to be able to be a lawyer in a more lawyerly way. And I think that expertise is valuable, and therefore it's expensive, and you can't afford all of it, and you don't need to for it to sit around your P&L, because you don't need it all the time. So I think that kind of more, well, in a way, everything that I was dreaming of in that kind of flexible access, what you need at the point of need. I think with the way tech is going, it's finally be companies will be able to access it more easily, and so lawyers can do more interesting work. Um, and also we can see the emergence of kind of business support, for lack of a better word, because that's a term that I guess is still used in law, or that kind of wrapper around lawyers that can be, you know, introducing this new technology, and they work in partnership, but it would be more fluid and more exciting, I think. So I think it's a really, the next 5-10 years is going to be, I'd like to think, finally leading us to a good place of change
Yeah.
from a cultural point of view, because we should want to be divorcing ourselves from the billable hour and the kind of tyranny of being in one place, because otherwise it's not as good as if you are, let's say, at home or whatever. And all that kind of structure inflexibility has really damaged a lot of very good professionals, and continues to do that. So it's the opportunity of a lifetime.
Do you think that's the thing that will, my final question, do you think that's, AI and changing those ways of working is going to be the thing that restores maybe a better semblance of work-life balance in the industry?
Well, I like it to be that kind of revolutionary step that brings, the step change that we had with the industrial revolution, where you had this kind of human and the machine. They were, not 1 plus 1 makes 2, but it felt like you know um a much stronger kind of partnership. And I think we have that opportunity to create that kind of, superhuman almost, powered by these two super lawyer, let's say, but in a way that gives the lawyer also breathing space. Because I think we do need to spend more time thinking. I know attention spans are very small, but and short, but a good lawyer needs time to think. And if these two freeze that time, obviously you could still be valued, but your value. You don't have to only have value by time. You can think in a different way. So I think it's a good opportunity for us to go back to be strong lawyers and help set up kind of frameworks that are really important around tech and AI and ethics and all these problems that we do know we have. But lawyers are now too busy doing contracts that are probably churning completely uninteresting work. So if we can do that really well, now obviously the big word is if, because we might not be good enough at implementing. But I think the opportunity is massive and it's there and it's exciting and we should welcome it.
That is wonderful. Thank you, Dana, so much for that. For somebody who spends so much of their time gazing towards the horizon and think about what might come down the line, I think it's could be the ultimate gift to the industry that they would spend more of their time doing that, reflecting on the things they need to reflect on, and do that as well. If you are watching today's podcast and you've enjoyed it, please, if you don't already do so, follow Dana. It would make the most logical sense to do so as well. You'll be at the cutting edge of what's going on, as you heard today, in terms of lots of thinking about how we're going to work, and the things that are probably hiding in plain sight in front of you in terms of female representation, other representation as well. So please do take a look. She's a voice who's going to be important to our industry for the next decade for obvious reasons. Equally, if you've enjoyed the podcast, please do subscribe, share it with a friend, send it to your management maybe as well, give them something to think about as well. It's been a joy celebrating these voices, these leaders so far. So Dana, thank you for being the latest person to join us on doing this as well. And you know that I love your work and you're doing a great job out there. And yeah, thanks for making time for us today.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been great.